by clicking More or the three dots in the bottom right corner of your screen. Select Language Interpretation, then choose English or Spanish, and click Done. If you wish to hear only the interpreter and not the original speaker, be sure to click Mute Original Audio. Muy buenas tardes, estaremos ofreciendo interpretación simultánea al inglés y al español durante esta reunión. Si desea escuchar la interpretación en inglés o español, haga clic en el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla Zoom. Verá un icono en forma de globo terráqueo que aparecerá después de estas instrucciones. Si nos acompaña a través de la aplicación Zoom para teléfonos inteligentes, seleccione su idioma haciendo clic en donde dice Más o en los tres puntitos en la esquina inferior derecha de la pantalla. Seleccione Interpretación del idioma, elija español o inglés y haga clic en donde dice Listo. Si desea escuchar solo al intérprete y no a los presentadores, asegúrese de hacer clic en Silenciar audio original.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good evening, AEA community, and welcome to Parent University. My name is Kathy Montez, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's topic is the AEA Comprehensive School Safety Plan. Our agenda will be as follows. We will begin the evening with Superintendent Dr. David Sharetta reviewing what is a comprehensive school safety plan and also how AEA defines school safety. Following Dr. Sharetta, Interim Principal Dr. Jose Diaz will speak, and this will be followed by our Health and Safety Committee members, Veronica LaRoche and Tina Royster, who will present the revisions to the 2024-25 Comprehensive School Safety Plan. To close out this evening, we will review questions and comments we received regarding the Comprehensive School Safety Plan from attendees that registered for this meeting tonight. Now I would like to turn over the evening to Dr. Sharetta. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, everyone. Muy buenas noches a todos. The purpose of tonight, as Kathy mentioned, is to go over the topic of the Comprehensive School Safety Plan. This is a plan that the state of California mandates that all LEAs or local education agencies, of which Einstein is one, must develop and review every year with input from staff, from parents, and from ultimately approval from a board of trustees. So we have had much input from staff. We've had a first read or review by our board of trustees. Now this evening is a presentation and gathering of questions and input from parents. As Kathy mentioned at the end, she'll provide some more information about where follow-up questions and comments can be sent so that we can consider including those in the plan. And then this plan will be approved by our board and it will be then in effect for 24-25. What is the Comprehensive School Safety Plan? This plan is really our blueprint for how the organization responds to safety in all its forms. If we think of school safety, and we went through this exercise as part of our safety committee work, when society thinks of school safety, we're usually thinking of metal detectors and bulletproof glass and absolutely no bullying and reducing 100% of risk in those really narrow areas. Obviously, those are super important things to reduce and eliminate in a school, but the idea of overall safety is much more broad and nuanced. And so what we did in our committee is we sat and did an exercise where we really brainstormed what a healthy and safe school community should look like at AEA. I'm not going to go over all of these items. We have a really long list of brainstormed items from our committee, but they're important. They're aspirational. We know we're not always there on all of them. But the interesting thing to me is it wasn't just, we need to frisk everybody when they come on campus. Most of the aspirational things were ideas like respectful staff, respectful students, respectful parents, able to trust adults, secure, clean, active and engaged, welcoming. I'm just jumping around on my list. No yelling, playful, calm, but fun. Trained staff, knowledge of trauma, understanding staff triggers. Inclusive community, know the local neighborhood, multilingual. And so as we went through this exercise, we recognized, and we've been guided by a company out of LA called Jaffe School Safety Services. And if anyone's interested, I interviewed the founder, Chris Jaffe, on the Superintendent's Hangout podcast earlier in the year. And Chris guided us in this idea of understanding that it's impossible to eliminate 100% of risk from our lives. We get in 2,000-pound vehicles every day. We drive to work. That may be the riskiest part of our day when we get into a car. We often don't really think about it. We grab our coffee and we go, but that's a risk. We cross the road every day. We take risks all the time. They're calculated. We hope that we're safe. We try to mitigate. We wear a seatbelt, for example, and the same thing in a school community. We have a single point of entry after the first bell of the day rings. We try to keep a control of who comes on and who leaves our campus. We have rules on campus. We have rules for adults as well. Do those always get followed 100% of the time? Obviously not. They don't also in society. So schools are not separate from the context of the society in which they exist. So a little bit later on, we're going to address some of the questions that have arisen. But I just wanted to kind of frame the concept of health and safety and planning in that context. A few years ago, we did this presentation and a parent raised their hand and said, can you absolutely guarantee beyond the shadow of a doubt, 100%, that nothing will ever happen to my child on any of the Einstein campuses? And as hard as it is for me to say, I had to tell the truth, which is, no, we can't guarantee that nothing will happen to anyone 100% of the time at any area and any place in our life. But the important thing is to mitigate as much as possible, to reduce the risk as much as possible, to look at addressing the riskiest and most harmful areas first and trying to really limit those and continue to work on this. This is aspirational work. It's why we have monthly fire drills. It's why we have lockdown drills, et cetera. I want to say one thing before I turn over the microphone to Dr. Diaz, our interim middle school principal. The Einstein community deserves a lot of kudos and credit for the response to the unexpected and torrential rains in late January. We had been having discussions internally in our safety committee about how we could plan a reunification drill. Most schools and school districts don't plan for reunification drills because it's so messy. Basically, what that is how we can return students to their parents at the end of a day or after an emergency happens. It's messy. You have thousands of kids or hundreds of kids. You have to coordinate with parents. How do you turn them over? How do you write down who made it to their parents? Who's going home with the neighbor? Do they have permission? It's incredibly complicated. And we've been planning for several months. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do it authentically? And then Mother Nature had different plans. And so we were hit with this torrential rainstorm out of nowhere, seemingly. There was widespread flooding. The power went out. And so both of our campuses needed to deal with power outages, bathroom doors that locked automatically and wouldn't open. So if students were in there, they could get out, but other students couldn't get in. Our student information systems went down. So we had to use analog lists and printouts and radios and cell phones. And then the cell service started to falter. And that's what real life is about. So this safety plan tries to codify and set protocols for those things. But we also understand that when something really happens, it's messy. And then after the fact, and thankfully in this case, no one was injured. We had a few vehicles that were lost, but vehicles are replaceable. But after the fact, then we try to learn and get better. So I wanted to give the Einstein community a lot of credit for remaining calm. And the staff was great. The parents were great. The kids were great. I never thought I'd be talking about torrential flooding in San Diego, but such are the days that we're living in. So with that, I would like to turn the microphone over to Dr. Diaz. He's going to address a specific recent series of events that have occurred at the middle school. And the reason he's going to bring it up is everyone should have received a letter from me dated from Monday of this week. And that's what this is in reference to.
Thank you, Dr. Shredder. With respect to the incident in question, I just want to, keep the parameters that I can't speak, obviously, to specific discipline, specific students that have been involved. What I can speak to, however, is what the process is within the boundaries of our board of trustees approved school discipline policy, as well as California Ed Code, right? So, and this, although, I was just recently named the interim principal, I've been involved in investigations both at the high school level, middle school level, and even in the military. And generally the process is fairly the same. And usually what it starts with is a report, and it's initiated by either a report to a staff member, myself, or even through our hotline, which if you have access to their website, you can access that hotline. After that, an investigation will take place. Usually involves myself, an assistant principal, if there was one, or an admin designee. And what that investigation usually entails are student interviews, not interrogations. So we're dealing with 11, 12, 13-year-old children. And then trying to corroborate any of those witness statements. If there's evidence that's presented to us, to delve as much into what the accuracy of that evidence is. If there's video, text messages, whatever media, we'll delve into that process and try to investigate the validity of those claims. After the investigation or throughout the investigation, there's the due process. Everyone that's involved, whether they're directly involved, indirectly involved, we try to inform all the families as best as we can in terms of what their child's involvement might be, and then inform them of their rights in respect to their rights of what we can and can't do. We are not a law enforcement agency. Through that due process, then we may issue some outcomes, whether it leads to a suspension in school or out of school. It depends on what the incident is. Some of that is detailed in our school discipline policy. And appropriate authorities, if we need to involve law enforcement, we will involve law enforcement. However, that is outside of our process, our school discipline policy and California Ed Code. Even, law enforcement will ask us for some information, and whatever information we can share, we will share with them. And if they have any follow-up questions, they have their own timeline. They have their own investigative process that they need to go through. But we have a liaison with SDPD through their juvenile services team. If you're a part of a school district, you may have school police, which are usually an arm of San Diego PD. And then after that, we always try to respect the process of confidentiality, right? There are some state laws that require us to inform teachers of a student if there has been discipline issued out. Those details, though, are only available within our school information system to those that need to know it, just like a cumulative file that goes, for every student. That's confidential information. Everything that we have goes in that file, and it's shared with the parents only of that student. Other than that, we will never publicize what the suspension or expulsion, and just for the knowledge of the wider crowd, a principal at any school in San Diego County cannot expel a student themselves. A principal can make a recommendation for expulsion, and in most mechanisms, that then goes to an outside panel Some districts have their own panel that they staff with neutral parties, and then that information is reviewed and then usually presented to a board who then makes the ultimate decision of whether a student is expelled or not, right? Contrary to popular belief, I can't hand those out. And in my previous experience, there was a very, very strict timeline when expulsions could be handed out, when suspensions could be handed out, and you had to have all the corroborating paperwork to issue those out. And that's the same case at AEA because we're all guided by California Ed Code. And with that said, there may be this perception that nothing is happening. Well, I can only tell you that I will always follow what the process is that our board dictates, that our superintendent dictates, and what California Ed Code dictates. That's the only reassurance I can give you, and we can do that. We do that as a team. You know, that's all I have to say right now on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diaz. Now we will have our presentation from our Health and Safety Committee members, Veronica LaRoche and Tina Royster.
Good evening, AEA community. Buenas tardes, AEA comunidad. My name is Tina Royster. I'm a member of the Health and Safety Committee, Ms. V. Hi, good evening. My name is Veronica LaRoche, and I'm also a member of the committee. The AEA Safety Committee was created in 2020 as an ad hoc committee to support the development and creation of the AEA Comprehensive Safety Plan. This plan develops strategies aimed at the prevention of and education about emergency events and potential incidents involving crime and violence on the school's campus. What you see on the screen right now is our ad hoc committee members. Members comprise of staff from both campuses, both the elementary and the middle school campuses. These were our meeting dates that we held to go over the plan. And next, all right, there you go. Okay, hi. I will go over the brief overview of the sections of the plan. So section 1 is, there's 3 sections to the plan. Section 1 is the administrator's red book, so it's kind of like the playbook. It has it holds the oath, affirmations page, emergency plans, key LEA contacts, command posts, and search and rescue and evacuation maps. Next slide, please. Section 2 is the emergency actions. So it holds the at-a-glance guides and the top 8 emergency actions. So those include all clear, the lockdown, secure campus, shelter in place, take cover, drop cover and hold on, the evacuation and off-site evacuations also. Next slide, please. Sections 3 are emergency events. So this section includes over 40 different emergency events that could potentially happen on our campuses, and also the actions and responses to those events. Next slide, please. And then the revisions link. On page 2, we changed, we notified the board members that we would have a public meeting, which is happening this evening. On page 12, we will be replacing the 2022-2023 AEA staff roster with the current roster. And on page 51, under emergency action shelter in place, we will be changing the wording to take attendance. Front office will call classrooms to check student accountability and then wait for further instructions. And this is to make sure that it is aligned with what we are currently doing on both campuses.
Some other revisions that were made, page 52, the emergency action shelter in place. So the revision is to make announcements on the public address system or on walkie-talkies. So we've been using walkie-talkies, so we had to add in the walkie-talkies. Also, page 54 is the emergency action drop, cover, and hold. We wanted to elaborate on that process. We revised that, and also throughout the whole document, we are updating names and positions of staff members. And yeah, that's it. That's about it. Those are the revisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tina and Veronica. Great job. I will now read questions and comments that we received from the community that were directly related to the Comprehensive School Safety Plan. Dr. Sharetta and Dr. Diaz, please feel free to raise your hand or speak freely to respond to the specific comments or questions you'd like to answer after I read them. I would like to let the community know that if there are any questions or comments that you still have, to please email those to support@aeacs.org. That's support, SUPPORT, at aeacs.org. Our first one is a question/comment under the behavior infraction policy on page 207. So that would be what is comprised of the AEA CMS student handbook section in the Comprehensive School Safety Plan. It says repeated or excessive minor infractions can become major infractions and result in administrative intervention. And then under major infractions, it says major infractions are those that warrant the intervention of a school administrator or additional staff intervention. In the event a student's behavior violates the safety of others, or if the student demonstrates defiance of school staff or disrupts the learning of others, the student may be dismissed from class and referred to an appropriate staff member for additional support. So that was a comment that was made, and I'm not sure this is for the middle school handbook section of it. So Dr. Diaz, I'm not sure if you want to elaborate anything on that.
Sure. No, yeah, that's that I can definitely talk to that. Yes, there's a series of minor and major infractions, and for those of you aware, a lot of that is right now tracked in our new system, our behavior support system through our Power School system. So, if they're minor infractions, usually I would like to have our teachers address that at the lowest level. As the question states, if it becomes repeated, additional support could be provided, but that's not necessarily always me. Perhaps it's a counseling referral, a student advocate referral, maybe to our behavior team, our school psychologist. Again, it depends on what the context of the issue is, right? Behavior is a form of communication. So there may be something that's going on that we can address and find out if there's a repeated issue. Perhaps it's related to a student's 504 or a student's IEP. That would involve a case manager in that sense for a reason, for whatever reason. Major infractions may be, bullying or a fight or whatever. There are appropriate interventions for those and also appropriate consequences. Dr. Sharetta has talked about, and you may have heard some of our other staff members talk about a restorative plan. And without editorializing too much, restorative doesn't mean an absence of consequences. Consequences are always applied, but the restorative piece comes during and after that. We would like to have the students learn from what the behavior is, right? For example, if a student doesn't know how to accomplish a math problem, we don't write them off and say, that's it, you don't know math, you got to leave school. behavior is also taught, right? Discipline actually comes from the word to teach. So that's part of how we address the minor and major infractions, but also something that we instituted this year with our behavior support thing is to reward some of the behaviors we want to see, right? This is well researched in terms of PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports, that if you reinforce the behaviors that you want to see, students are more likely to do that. While the provocative behaviors tend to arise and catch everyone's attention, the students, and right now what our data is showing is that 80% of the students are behaving as we expect them to be and are meeting expectations, which is in line with current research in terms of MTSS, PBIS, and restorative practice.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz. Go ahead.
May I add just a little more color commentating to that very thoughtful answer? The Board of Trustees meetings every month include a summary of all suspensions and expulsions that were completed in the previous 30 days and have a running count for the year. So they obviously don't have any identifying information, but there's been questions or suggestions that nothing ever happens. Well, that's a running tally of at least one metric of something happening. It clearly doesn't give any background to it, but the research does point to the fact that if you suspend and don't have a reintegration plan, a restorative plan, then it's really fairly useless to even suspend. And the logic of saying that a student who's struggling at school, we should just send them away from school so they can sit at home and not do anything and then come back and struggle again without helping guide them back, is we're school. We're not a penitentiary. And so what Dr. Diaz says is absolutely the truth. One of the things about restorative practices that I have noticed, and I was speaking to the person at the San Diego County who's in charge of restorative for the whole county, and we were commenting that very often we tend to want really punitive actions for someone else's child. Someone else's child gets in trouble, allegedly gets in trouble, and we want a really stiff penalty. We want an example made of them. But when it's our own child, we often advocate for a second chance, which essentially is a part of the restorative piece, right? And so what we're saying is there are going to be consequences, but there will also be restorative practices for everyone. And as a side note, and Ms. V and others work with our students across our campuses on restorative practices, and we're actually seeing students calling for restorative circles with their friends because there's a conflict, there's a tension. We're seeing staff members calling for restorative practices with other colleagues. Okay, that's never going to make it on Facebook. That's never going to be in the news, but it's happening. And so those are really helpful things because it's showing that humans are inherently good and want to fit into the social fabric and want to work to be better and to get past our conflicts and work together. So that's my color commentating.
Thank you, Dr. Sharetta and Dr. Diaz for that. Our next comment/question potentially may be for Brad, our Director of Technology, or Dr. Diaz. This says page 28 under the FAQ section says that middle school teacher emails can be found on the school website, but this website does not contain teacher emails, though it would be great if it did so parents can contact teachers if needed.
A couple of things Brad can add to it. If you have access to the PowerSchool portal, you should be able to click on your teacher's name when you're able to view your student's schedule, and it would take them right to the email. PowerSchool's connected to all the emails, so as long as you can access the PowerSchool portal, and tech support can get you your login and your students login for that, you should be able to access the email. And I think Brad has some other areas where those emails can be accessed.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Diaz. That is the preferred way to get teacher contacts, is through the Parent PowerSchool portal. And as Dr. Diaz said, if you need the password to that account, we can provide it to you in the help desk, support@aacs.org. The emails are not on the staff directory currently. There's a notice at the top that those have been removed to get a handle on phishing attacks, spam messaging, and other cybersecurity incidents. And so to reach the teachers, you can go through the parent portal or reach out to the help desk, and with the staff member you want to reach, brief description, and we'll make sure that message gets forwarded.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Dr. Diaz. Our next item, a comment to add to the safety plan is parent said Rady's Children's Hospital San Diego should be included in the list of local emergency numbers for hospitals on page 11, since they treat children. So this is a great point. Tina, if you could make a note, please, for us to add that. We have all of the local hospitals that surround both campuses, but this might be a great one to add as well. If Dr. Sharetta agrees with that, we'll add that. Great. We'll add that to the plan as well. Thank you to the parent that sent in that comment. Our next comment is there a plan in place for a quick and efficient dismissal in event of an emergency, especially if dismissal is earlier than typical times? Dr. Sharetta, I think you covered this, but take it away.
Quick, that's a little bit like saying, can we do home renovations that are fast, silent, and with no dust? What was the question? A quick and efficient?
Is there a plan in place for a quick and efficient dismissal in the event of an emergency, especially if dismissal is earlier than typical times? For example, our reunification drill on January 22nd. Or not drill, reunification live event.
Yeah, all I'll say at this point, because the reason I'm being cautious is because some of the information is proprietary and redacted for safety reasons. We, in our safety committee, we have a subgroup that works on just this very planning. So yes, it looks very different on our two campuses, but it also looks very different depending on what the imperative is that is causing the need for evacuation. That's why this type of planning is so nuanced. A gas leak is one thing, torrential downpouring is another, a lightning storm is another, a terrorist attack is another, an earthquake is another, and we could just go on, and they're all different and with different features. But yeah, that's what we work on in the safety committee and in the subgroup. And we will continue to refine and drill and practice. And it also didn't come up today because this is not totally related to evacuation, but there's the E is the evacuation. We train every year all of our staff in a protocol called ALICE. It stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, or Evacuate. And we have staff members who are certified trainers. We are also hosting in April for local LEAs to send their admin and security staff to be trained for a 3-day training live and in person on our middle school campus. And so we take this very seriously. We take the E very seriously, which is the evacuate piece.
Thank you, Dr. Sharetta. The next question is, what are the differences between the 2022/23 school safety plan and the 2024/25? I think the parent meant to say 2023/24 versus the 2024/25. And those items were covered in the presentation from Veronica and Tina already. So I don't know that we need to add anything to that unless Dr. Schroeder or Dr. Diaz feels the need.
You know, I think that our two committee members did a good job of covering those. I would say that as we've continued to evolve in our thinking on safety, and we have continued to evolve on things like bringing in additional levels of CPR and a protocol, which I must give credit to Dr. Matt Kill, who is a member of our community, who actually brought this to us first, and then we were able to incorporate it down the road into our staff training, which is a protocol called Stop the Bleed. So all of our staff members now are trained, in addition to the ALICE active shooter counter training, everybody's trained in stopping catastrophic acute bleeding incidents that can save lives. So some of that is detailed in the plan. That's an upgrade. The other things are really more kind of administrivia, as I would call it, changing rosters, changing names, contact information, et cetera.
Great, thank you, Dr. Shredda. I do want to add just one little piece to that, is that all of our common areas, classrooms, health offices, custodial areas, every place on campus is now outfitted with tourniquet kits for our classrooms. Each classroom has 2 tourniquets each. And then obviously all of the other smaller offices and common areas, front offices and so forth, those also have those as well. Something we don't like to talk about, but it does need to be addressed. So
and I would add Narcan to that as well.
Yes, Narcan, and also we do have, both campuses have AED devices on them. Each campus has 2 devices. One is located in the health office, and the other is out by the PE area, the court area, or at the elementary in the PE room over at the elementary. So there are 2 AED devices that are tested monthly by our staff on both campuses, with pads that are for adults and for children size. So we have those as well. Okay, the next comment we have is, this will end out probably the evening, but can any unanswered questions during the Zoom meeting be addressed later? And I want to encourage the community to put any questions or comments straight out to support@aeacs.org. Any follow-up questions, comments, those can be emailed directly there. And then I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Sharetta, if you'd like to close out the evening.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Thank you to all the participants, the presenters, the folks who are translating and interpreting, the people who are watching on YouTube, out there in the ether. This is an important topic. It really, a plan is important, but it's not very useful if the humans behind it aren't trained, empowered, compassionate, reflective, flexible. And so the beauty of the Einstein community is, as an IB community where we adhere to the IB learner profile traits, those dovetail really well with being prepared for and adapting to changing environments. And so we're committed to getting better all the time. We're not perfect. We'll never be perfect. But I would encourage all of us, staff, students, parents, to really, especially on the most stressful days when we're late to work or late to the grocery store or late to pick up our student at their game, to know that, you know, any interaction we have within the community, whoever you are, student, staff, parent, has a ripple effect. It doesn't do much good for us to work on, you know, restorative justice and an anti-bullying program with kids if parents pull up in front of the school and yell at staff members. It also doesn't do much good to work on anti-bullying with students if staff members yell at students. Right? And so these are things that I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not saying that it's one group or one person's fault, but this is a team. This is a community effort, and that's how we get safer. That's how we get better, and that's how we actually make a 150-page school safety plan come to life and help keep everybody safer and happier. So, thank you. Have a good evening, everybody. Drive safely if you have to drive. Enjoy time with your family, and follow up on the questions to the address that Kathy mentioned, and we'll see you soon.